I started reading Inside Mari around summer 2012. For some reason, that period of my life, 2011 to 2013, is really hard for me to remember. I think, looking back, that was my floating period. I was playing Magic, occasionally partying at government and time, and I was starting to fall out of love with anime and manga. When I first picked up Mari, I remember catching up to where this series was and not caring for it at all. Not too long after that, I stopped watching anime completely and was reading maybe 2 or 3 series over the next few years. The scene was kinda shit during that time, IMO, but I don't drop manga and decided to revisit Mari again a few years later. But after finishing the series the second go around, again, I was not impressed. So I gave it a third shot recently, and has my opinion changed on the manga at all? God fucking no. Inside Mari is Oshimi's take on the slow burn Yuri disguised as a body swap manga. Issei Komori is a college dropout who spends his days inside his apartment playing games and jerking off. Every night, he goes to the local convenience store so he can stalk a high schooler who also happens to come by at the same time every night. One morning, after doing his usual incel shit, he awakens to find himself in the body of the girl he stalked. Mori Yoshizaki is a popular high schooler who is the center of attention or something. Oshimi doesn't draw attractive women very well, so she doesn't really come off as the beauty that she's supposed to be, but whatever. Komori, now inhabiting Mari's body, has to carry on with her life while trying to suppress suspicion from not only her family, but also friends, boyfriends of friends, and a stalker turned love interest. All this while trying to figure out puberty, maintaining a social pedigree, and figure out what happened to Mari. Inside Mari really drew me in on my first 3 reads with how interesting the premise initially was. The fact that Komori was inside Mari's body, but Mari's soul, if you will, was unaccounted for, that was a unique twist. Now, it wasn't all just drama and hijinks, but also a really cool mystery. When I was a kid, I read Neoko, also known as Himitsu, by Keigo Higashino. It's a Japanese body swap mystery where after an accident in which a man's wife dies and daughter is injured, the wife's mind mysteriously takes over their daughters. It's a decent read. Mari opens up with that same level of intrigue, and it paces itself so well that you really want to see what will happen next. Even though Komori is introduced as a shitty character, he does an admirable job of trying to maintain Mari's life and not to indulge in the temptations that he has towards this child's body. The interest for me though peaked around these early chapters. As the story carries on, it just becomes so boring. As mentioned, the pacing is really on point. It feels thematically like 90s and early 2000s teen dramas. There's resolution with all the issues that initially arise. Komori starts to improve as a person while inhabiting Mari. We get a sense of background for how he ended up becoming such a bitch boy, and it actually made me pity him a bit. I never really had problems making friends growing up, or even just vibing with people in a setting, until I got to college. In college, it was so hard for me to make any sort of lasting relationship with the people around me, and I don't know what happened. Even after college, I was able to still make friends in the workforce or at clubs, but something about the school setting, it really fucked with me and my social skills. I related to that aspect of Komori's character, and I get falling into depression because you're keeping a big secret and not wanting to disappoint your parents. But that's really the last moment you root for Komori. Any sort of character development he has feels odd and fragmented, like it's not authentic to what he'll actually end up doing. The supporting cast of this manga is extremely lackluster. Yuri Kakiguchi is a weird stalker chick who has been following Mari so closely for so long that she immediately picks up that the Mari that is in front of her isn't actually Mari. This bitch is completely off her rocker. She's so fucking unhinged that you cringe whenever she says anything. Her entire personality is based around Mari. Everything is Mari, and there's nothing else to her. Her character design also sucks butthole. The entire art design of Inside Mari is really bad. I don't know what Oshimi had going on at this point in time, maybe another larger series, but the art of Inside Mari is just so flat. While it is clearly Junji Ito inspired, it doesn't work well as a whole. Oshimi has shown an ability to morph his art at a moment's notice to express the setting and tone that only a hyper-talented mangaka can flawlessly do. But none of his trademark style is in Mari, and that's such a fucking shame. Eventually, Komori and Kakiguchi are able to get in contact with other Komori, and it's like he doesn't know anything that's going on. At this point, the series gets so bad. I can't fucking remember anything about this series. And I just finished it again. There's a lot of sexual exploration around this point in the manga, and Oshimi telegraphs so obviously that Mari is a lesbian. Like, this is what you wanted to tell us? If you were going to switch to a Yuri manga that's played mostly straight, why wait 25 chapters in to do that? And holy fuck, talk about exhausted ideas. Shit I've read in Happiness or Flowers of Evil or Blood on the Tracks are spread throughout Mari. It's so disappointing cause Mari feels so creatively bankrupt with the masturbation scene when you compare it to Tracks. In fact, there is a bedroom scene towards the end of Inside Mari that's the exact same scene as the bedroom scene in Tracks. Aside from blatant self-copying, Oshimi's attempts to develop Kakiguchi and other Komori during this time is done so weakly. Does Kakiguchi like Mari or Komori? Does Komori like Kakiguchi because he's affectionate towards her, or is he embracing Mari and leaning into it? The scene where the two hold hands for the first time is nice, and the masturbation scene at Komori's apartment is like Basic Instinct sort of cool, I guess. But then, out of nowhere, Melodrama injects itself into every chapter of this series. It just fucking moonfall warp speeds into it, and at times it works. I won't lie and say that the confession on top of the bridge wasn't moving. It truly was a hallmark scene that could have been taken from any of the classic shoujos. And Kakiguchi's reaction to it was sensational. I even enjoyed the date at the amusement park later on and the confrontation with Mari's mother. Oshimi does have a real skill with slowly morphing relationships. I truly did believe that the unholy Komori Mari hybrid and Kakiguchi were a modern-day teenage lesbian couple. It wasn't ecchi, it wasn't done with an agenda in mind. It's two people who are learning to love each other and help one another unearth and move past deep-rooted trauma. And the confirmation that Mari was, always, without question, gay, was great, and I loved how that was hammered home in this manga. I also really loved the touch that Oshimi threw in with Mari not going to college and Komori going back home to live with his parents after failing in Tokyo. These people weren't meant for that sort of life. College isn't for everyone, and I think more people should take time off after high school and before college just so you can mentally prepare yourself for the responsibilities to such a commitment that post-secondary school is.
Why are you making it complicated? It's easy.
The manga ends so abruptly that I think it validates my opinion that Oshimi wasn't ever fully invested into Inside Mari, at least not to the level of his other series. There's something to be said about modern mangaka that take on several projects at the same time or release shorter running manga so that they can tell more of their stories throughout their careers. But Inside Mari to me feels like a snapshot of everything that Oshimi does poorly. His endings are very lackluster or drawn out, his art can be quite boring and uninspired at times, and the constant plot twists soon fall into parody. Think M. Night if he was given the okay to write an adolescent manga. I just wish we could have seen more of the real Mari, what Komori ends up doing, and more of Mari's mother. 20 more chapters could have really turned this series around, and for an Oshimi manga, for me to say that, I do believe that this ending would have benefited by hitting 100 chapters. All this being said, Inside Mari wasn't horrible, but it was my least liked of Oshimi's work. For every interesting thing that I read, there were 4 other things that bothered the fuck out of me to the point of annoyance. Maybe I'll read it again in a few years and love it. Who knows? I wonder what Noralities thinks of this piss poor 4 out of 10.